Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett. And as you know, Your Leo Nation, we believe in and support the rule of law. With us today, usually our behind the scenes guy, but more and more often, I'm looking forward to it, our in front of the camera, on camera guy, Anthony Jackson. Good morning, AJ, as I call you. I think you hate that, but what do I care?
Hey, no, I don't mind it.
Then
Twin
I'll stop
brother,
doing it.
my twin brother, they call him AJ for years, so it's kind of refreshing I get called AJ. It's
And what's
cool.
his first name?
Andrew.
I was going to say Anthony, then I'd be really confused.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Thank
we'll
you for
call
having
you.
me, Chief.
Yeah, I'll call you AJ. How about AJ2, like a Star Wars robot or something?
I should have never told you.
What? Anthony, thanks for being on today. And it's just I am looking forward to you being on more and more as a co-host because we get great ideas, requests from our listeners, viewers, and I think, but at least as often we get it from you. I get it from you, and today is no exception. So I invited you on because I want you to talk about at least one of the topics that you sent to me, and it's an important one, not a new one, but it's certainly important and it's certainly indicative of what we're dealing with, at least in one state. Unfortunately, many more than that. So I want to dive right into it. We got a few topics we really want to hit on today. And the first one, it may sound like when I kind of introduce, we're going to talk about, you might say, what does it have to do with the rule of law, law enforcement, but really rule of law? Again, we try to talk about things that are affected by or involved related to the rule of law. I think we're pretty consistent, maybe not always, but generally that's what Your Leo Nation's about. And this one, again, although it may seem a little bit maybe out of the wheelhouse related to rule of law, I think it's highly closely related to the rule of law. And that topic has to do with NPR, or National Public Radio. By the way, Anthony, have you heard about the new federal bill that's going to create a broadcast network that supports conservative views, supports law enforcement, supports traditional American values, going to be funded by all American taxpayers? Have you heard about that bill they're working on? Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't.
You know why, right?
It doesn't
It doesn't
exist?
exist. No, doesn't exist. And this is exactly what I'm
It
talking
sounded too
about.
good to
So
be true.
did it sound good to be
Yeah.
true? And by the way, if there were a bill to do that, I still wouldn't support it. And here's why. So National Public Radio. So National Public Radio, NPR, it came out of some legislation back in the late 60s. And out of that legislation was kind of born NPR, PBS, these national media platforms, news platforms, public education. And I'm old enough, 60 years old, remember listening to NPR, watching PBS, I think more accurately, watching PBS, watching there's McNeil Lear and other shows, uh, broadcasters, things like this, news reporters on these platforms. And I got a lot of information when I was much younger from PBS and educational shows. And by the way, I enjoyed a lot of it, like a lot of people do. But one of the things we have to remember is like it, hate it, whether one is conservative, one is liberal, one supports this candidate, that elected official, whatever it is, we have to remember something that unlike the private sector, whether it's CNN or it's OAN, it's Fox, it's MSNBC, it's Newsmax, it's the ABC, all of these are private entities. And we know that not one of them is straight down the middle. It never has been that way. You can go back 100 years or 80 years back to what was called, yellow journalism, and journalism tried to influence public opinion, not just reporting the news. So we know that whenever you have a human being involved in anything, especially when it comes to reporting the news, there's always going to be a bias. There always is. But I think it's incumbent upon us as individuals to try to pick and choose the best platforms, the best sources to get the most objective news reporting. The difference here is this is taxpayer funded. It is taxpayer funded. What that means is, unlike those private entities that I was talking about, where you can just turn off, never watch them, never listen to them, or turn them on, always listen, whatever it is, have a choice in the matter. You may be funding something here against your will with which you disagree. I don't know of any place in the Constitution, and this is where we talk about the rule of law, any place in the Constitution that requires or authorizes, allows the federal government to fund the dissemination of quote unquote news. You can't find it there because it doesn't exist there. Why is it so important? Let me read a little bit from an article. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. And I printed out just a few excerpts from it. This is from Yuri Berliner. He's a senior business editor from NPR. He's been there over 20 years. I think about 25 years he's been there. In the article, he talks basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he's a diehard liberal. He gladly, enthusiastically voted against Trump twice. So this is where he leans. But what he talks about here, and I give this guy a lot of credit. And by the way, he's paid the price for this, of course, since his first article I'm reading was published, which is his article. He says that it doesn't matter, how you lean politically or philosophically. The job of any news agency is to tell the truth. It is to provide the news, not make the news, not to modify the news, not to slant the news. It's just to disseminate information and investigate and interview and collate objectively. So let me read a little bit of this to you. Like many unfortunate things, the rise of advocacy took off with Donald Trump. As in many newsrooms, his election in 2016 was greeted at NPR with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and despair. Just to note, I eagerly voted against Trump twice, but felt we were obliged to cover him fairly. See, this is a journalist here. Doesn't matter who you like, who you hate, your job is to cover the news fairly. In this case, he's talking about Donald Trump specifically. But what began as a tough, straightforward coverage of a belligerent, truth impaired president. Now, by the way, even here, he indicates his bias. He calls Donald Trump a truth impaired president rather than just saying a president. But he still advocates for being objective in general, veered toward efforts to damage or topple Trump's presidency. In other words, he's saying that NPR found itself in a not found itself in a position. It put itself in a position of being a tool for one party or another, a mouthpiece for one party or another, an advocate against a particular political foe. I'm going to skip over some stuff here. It's very short. Persistent rumors that the Trump campaign collude with Russia over the election became the catnip that drove reporting. At NPR, we hitched our wagon to Trump's most visible antagonist, Representative Adam Schiff, who's now running for Senate in California. God help us. Schiff, who was a top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, became NPR's guiding hand, its ever present muse. By my account, NPR hosts interviewed Schiff 25 times about Trump and Russia. During many of those conversations, Schiff alluded to purported evidence of collusion. The Schiff talking points became the drumbeat of NPR news report. But when the Mueller report found no credible evidence of collusion, NPR's coverage was notably sparse. Russiagate quietly faded from our programming. Anthony, I know you had a chance to look at that. I
Yeah.
Go
Oh
ahead.
no. Finish your thought. I'll give you my
I was
thoughts.
just thinking, reading this, that having Adam Schiff on 25 times, and I watched this. By the way, I don't think I ever saw Adam Schiff on NPR at all. I didn't watch NPR for the reasons that are articulated right here in this article. But I did see Adam Schiff on other news outlets. And by the way, to their credit, not just me, but there were other left leaning journalists that were asking Adam Schiff, okay, when are you going to show us the proof? When are you going to show us the evidence? So it wasn't just the people on Fox News or other maybe more conservative outlets. He never came up with it. And you would think that in other words, just for the sake of like not being embarrassed, you would think that any editor, any program director, any anchor would have said at some point, say, listen, Congressman Schiff, we can't have you back on again. This is like number 14, and we still haven't seen any of the evidence of collusion. You keep telling us about it. But they didn't. They did it. And I mean, how do you see this, Anthony, as far as the bias?
That's one of the things I think, and it's a let me gather my thoughts on this. It's really frustrating to me when I see this on any network, or when I see these so-called journalists questioning politicians. It could be any politician for that matter, but specifically with Adam Schiff, is they don't ask those questions that everybody would want to know. They don't even ask follow-up questions. They may even ask a question where you're like, yes, they finally asked it, and then they don't follow up to it. And it's really weird. And it's very misleading too. I
Talk about
actually
misinformation.
yeah, I actually know people who follow NPR for the reasons given that you just talked about, how it's taxpayer funded, it's supposed to be neutral, right? And so they give it the benefit of the doubt instead of watching Fox News and CNN and stuff, supposedly. So that's the real big issue, is that there's people that are banking on that information to be nonpartisan. Hey, this is just the news. This is how we're reporting it. In reality, it's extremely left wing. They're not reporting certain stories that are stories, and they're saying it's not, like the Hunter Biden laptop, right?
Yep.
And
Yes.
I know we're going to get into that, but Adam Schiff, I mean, 25 times on there with no proof. I mean, in history, I haven't seen anybody lie that many times on TV to millions of people and not get any pushback. I mean, the guy's running for senator,
For
right
sin.
here
Yeah.
in California,
Yep.
and the man has lied 25 times on NPR.
Just
That's on
alone.
NPR.
Hmm.
Yeah, no repercussions, no pushback, and I think journalism is captured by a certain party or by certain entities, and that's
Hmm.
why, because anybody with an ounce of integrity would ask that question, like you said, hey, where's the evidence? You've been talking about all this stuff, multiple times. Where's
Yeah.
the evidence at? Anybody with an ounce of integrity would ask that, whether whatever side you're on. I mean, you have to, but they know that they're not going to get any pushback either. They're going to get pushback for asking that question, and that's why they don't.
Excellent point. This is an excellent point that their audience would be upset with them if they did dig deep, if they did
Yep.
challenge Adam Schiff. Anthony, it's an absolutely excellent, I think, observation that this is why it's truly it's catnip. It's a drug.
Hmm.
We simply want to perpetuate the accusations rather than dig into actuality. And if there is no actuality, we simply ignore it. And now we go on to the next accusation and we feed into that. And you touched on it. Another example is the Hunter Biden laptop.
Hmm.
Didn't cover it. They shelved the story. They complete like so many others, put it aside, ignored it, said that it was Russian disinformation. It wasn't true, so forth and so on. Then fast forward, it comes out the laptop is real. Even before officially it was authenticated by the FBI. Even before that, Hunter Biden himself said, "Yeah, maybe I could have left a laptop there." I mean, and this is long before it was officially authenticated. Everybody knew that it was real. Most people knew that it was real from day one,
The
but they
repairman got
wouldn't.
sent to jail, right? Didn't he?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
what would you get sent to jail for? I can't remember if he got sent to jail, but in other words, he was either accused or something for holding onto the laptop. Either
Yes.
way, whether he went to jail. A laptop that the media says wasn't real. This is how absurd it is. Now, again, what's the whole point of this when it comes to the rule of law? The point is, my point that I'm trying to drill down on is fine if private outlets at the New York Times or the New York Post, I gave two different kind of politically slanted publications there on purpose. If they want to publish a story with this slant or publish a story with that slant, you do you. You be happy with what you're doing. No problem here because I'm not paying for anything I don't want to pay for.
Right, it's
The
free
point
market.
here, it's a free market. The point here is that you, I, and everybody else who pays taxes is forced to support this entity through government mandate, which I find completely, utter, and absolutely provably unconstitutional. And this should not be happening, and that's why I use the fantasy example opening up. I mean, how many people on the other side of the political spectrum would be really upset if a conservative leaning or highly conservative if Breitbart was getting funding from the federal government, would they be happy with that? No, and they shouldn't be happy with it any more than I'm happy with this case right here. Another example is the George Floyd riots, George Floyd death, how that was covered,
Mhm.
and on. Talking about how America is infected with racism and so forth, and how law enforcement is so infected with racism, on and on. And I'm hoping people realize this. By the way, I just for the record, I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of funding now for PBS comes from private donations, come from charities, things like that. And I'm fine with that part of it. But not one penny, not 1 cent of taxpayer money should be going to a so-called news outlet any more than taxpayer money should be going to any political advocacy group. It should not be going. And
Right.
that's all the NPR is. I
Mhm.
don't want it going to the NRA. I don't want it going to, by the way, although it does, I don't want it going to Planned Parenthood. I don't want the federal government involved in any of these things because constitutionally, it's not authorized to do so. And it's one more example of the complete bastardization, the unmooring from the Constitution. So, with that, I want to get to the topic that you wanted to talk about. And boy, is it near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to turn the reins over to you right now, Anthony.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I do want to do two shameless plugs on our own podcast and
Oh,
our partner podcast, Truth Nation, because you brought up George Floyd and a couple, I want to say maybe 2 months ago or so, and we'll link it in the description. You guys, you and Bill Bodner, former SAC of the DEA, he, you guys broke down the fall of Minneapolis, right?
yes.
And broke down what happened, how George Floyd died, his toxicology report. And so if anybody is interested in actually watching that breakdown, we'll link it below and you can see exactly how NPR is literally lying to the American people. And another one is a couple months ago we had a former CIA field operative,
Sam
Sam
Fettis.
Faddis, yeah, and we had him on twice. But the last time we had him on, he exclusively covered the Hunter Biden laptop because he has a copy of the hard drive. And long story short, they as in Steve Bannon and Jack Maxey, flew him out to Washington, D.C. to verify the laptop because they didn't want to tout Russian disinformation or if it was a Chinese hoax or a Russian hoax, right? And so they actually had integrity right there because they didn't announce that they're going to be doing this or that. They just found Sam Faddis. They knew him. They flew him out over there to verify for it, and they also had another computer expert there, right?
Mhm.
And he knew right off the bat that this wasn't fake. Like he's seen one photo of Hunter Biden with a bunch of Hong Kong strippers there and, other men in there. And he said that you can't Photoshop a hotel room with all these people in there that are accurate to a T like that, and let alone the metadata in there. But I'll let you guys watch that. It's a very interesting episode. And it just shows that NPR was straight up lying, saying this is a nothing burger. We're not going to report it because it's not news, and they just totally avoided that because they knew it was going to affect the election.
Yep.
Everybody knew that. And that's
It's
why they had the 51 former so-called spies.
experts.
Yeah.
Right.
CIA intelligence experts vouch for it. It's because they're all on the payroll. They all got paid to do that. And, that's what we could assume because they straight up lied. So,
Yep.
yeah, I just wanted to say that, shout those two episodes out, and we'll
And by
link
the
them
way,
in.
and I love this the shameless plug. So thank you so much for that. And yeah,
But
that's this platform here, Your Leo Nation, with Sam Faddis, and then of course with Truth Nation with Bill Botter and myself, with a number of topics. But certainly the fall of Minneapolis is a great episode. So I encourage you to watch both of those on respective programs.
yep. Okay. And so we'll transition here. So I brought this up to you because I live here in California still. I have an
I feel
estate
for
like
you.
you, right? Yeah. And as you know, California, they have, one of the highest taxes, etc. And here's a problem though. We have people that are either idiotic or straight up evil running our government here. And why I say that, it's the proof is in the pudding. There the money that we give for certain programs that we voted for, that we know that needs to be fixed, is not being fixed. It's actually gotten worse. One of them is homelessness. And anybody with like you say, Mark, anybody with two brain cells that get slapped together, look around and go, hey, there's so many homeless people here. It looks like a third world country. Look at Oakland. Look at Skid Row in LA. Look at anywhere, even in these small towns, right?
Mhm.
And the weird part is we spent $24 billion in the past 5 or so years on homelessness. 24 billion to counteract it. I mean, you might as well just buy a house for everybody at that point, and you'd have some change left over. They didn't even do that. I don't even know what the hell they did with the money. And the funny part is,
By the way,
yeah, I
neither
was
do
about to
they.
say that.
No, literally,
I
go
tried
ahead.
to I tried to look into it. I tried to look into it and see what programs are going on, how they were trying to solve it, and th- they did an audit actually. And let me say this: did you know that in 2021 they asked Gavin Newsom, "Hey, can we do an audit to see where this money is going?" Because he claims, "Hey, we're going to disperse this money out. These cities are going to come up with a plan, and we're going to tackle homelessness." And you know what? I actually have a video I want to play right here.
What we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homeless in San Francisco.
How are you going to solve homelessness? What are you going to do as a new mayor? And I say, well, what are you going to do? Focus on a housing first model, direct access to housing.
Shelter, solve sleep, housing with wraparound and support services, solve homelessness. Homelessness absolutely can be solved.
Laid out a detailed homeless strategy. There's been no intentionality on homelessness in this state for decades. It's not been a focus.
I don't think we can solve homelessness. I know we can solve homelessness. We will reduce street homelessness quickly and humanely through emergency action.
The highest investment the state's ever made is $1 billion on homelessness. We are poised to pass a budget in the next few hours that will provide $12 billion of investments. I can literally quantify 58,000 people that we got off the streets last year, and none of you would believe it.
This state has not made progress in the last 2 decades as it relates to homelessness. Why?
We're not interested in funding failure. We're not interested in failing more efficiently when it comes to the issue of homelessness and the crisis on the street.
So now you see all the promises that he's made over the years. And you can see in his eyes, he has a lot of conviction. Who wouldn't buy that? We're watching, we're going, hey, this guy can probably solve it. But it's all theater.
Yes.
It's all theater. And how do I know that? He's not a great leader. He didn't even know where this money is going. And then he got pissed off at all these cities because he's taking the heat for it now. People are going, hey, Gavin Newsom, where the hell did this money go? And he blames it on everybody else. He deflects it and goes, hey, I'm pissed off too. And so I just want to bring up some stats here. We spent
Yep.
in California, we spent $24 billion in the past 5 years. And since 2013, homelessness has gone up 53%. There's about 180,000 homeless people in California today. And that's people counting and, trying to, it could be higher. We don't know. And I'm not even trying to villainize homelessness. Like, there's a lot of complex issues that need to be solved. There's There's a fentanyl crisis. There's drug addicts that are out there there's mental illness going on. There's a lot of reasons why people end up homeless, even just hard times. I get it. But taking more money from taxpayers is obviously not solving the issue at all.
No, of course not. And this is the usual SOP is
Hmm.
that, oh, okay, there's a problem that we caused. The solution is to throw more money at it. When the problem gets worse, then we throw more money at it. And
Yep.
I know people that may sound a little trite, it may sound a little simplistic, but ladies and gentlemen, look, I lived in California for 60 years, spent 30 years in state government with the California Highway Patrol. When I left, I was in top management of the largest state agency, law enforcement agency in the country with the CHP. I was close enough. I was close enough to um, Sacramento. In other words, in an operational point of view, I spent my entire 30 years in Los Angeles County. As many of you know, thank goodness I never had to go up to the belly of the beast. But when you end up in top management, you obviously become, more privy and quite frankly, by necessity, more involved in budgeting and understanding how things work and see what happens to money when it comes into your division, which I ran the division of Los Angeles County. And sometimes you just sit there and scratch your head about really. Let me give you one example, Anthony, and everybody listening right now. There was a program for homelessness, and I guess it was statewide. I'm not sure, but whether it was just Los Angeles County or not, it might have been just a county thing. So I want to be clear on that. But the point is, it doesn't matter if it's county or if it's state. Waste is waste. And there was a program. I do not know if it still exists. I've been retired for 3.5 years, but there was a program in the county for sure that required the securing, the storing of property of a homeless person that was living on state property, in other words, on the freeways, as far as my primary responsibility was as the chief of Southern Division. So when my officers removed homeless encampments, the law was is that the property, the belongings, whatever it was, unless it was hazmat or things like that, it had to be stored at taxpayer expense in a warehouse. There may have been more than one, but it was near downtown Los Angeles. There was a warehouse there with all of these different. Basically, there were like 55-gallon drums, I believe, I remember correctly, and there may be more than one, depending on how much property, so to speak, these people had, and they were stored there indefinitely. The only requirement was that if I remember correctly, that the homeless person had to come back and check in once a week to keep their property there, and there was no end game to this. I was
Wow.
thinking at the time, "Wait a minute, I pay taxes, I abide by the law. How about you store some of my crap that I'm trying to get through in my own garage where I can't park my car? Why do I not get some of these benefits?" Again, this is a taxpayer expense,
Right.
and so that's just one example. Let me read something here, Anthony. This is really important, I think. This from the Washington Examiner, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
Washington Examiner. And I don't know if you're looking at the same article, but you hit on this. Over the past 5 years, California spent $24 billion in addressing homelessness. An audit examined how over half of that, $13.7 billion, was spent on 5 programs across the state. According to state audit grant Parks, this report concludes that the state must do more to assess the cost effectiveness of its homelessness programs. The report also said, quote, in the absence of this information, the state cannot determine whether these programs represent the best use of its funds. In other words, unquote. In other words, California spent $13.7 billion on homelessness over the past 5 years with no idea if it was worth spending the money in that in the first place. In fact, according to the audit, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness has not been tracking whether spending on homeless programs has been effective since 2021. California, living up to the Democratic stereotype, has been blindly throwing billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars at the problem for years. By the way, I give my word, I had not read that entire passage when I said earlier about them throwing money at the problem. I just kind of saw the first sentence there. I said, this looks
Hmm.
interesting. It's exactly what I said, Anthony. It's exactly what I
Yep.
said. And by the way, the example I gave of spending money on maintaining property indefinitely for homeless people, things like this, that's one off the top of my head of 6 or 7 examples I could give you about absolute utter waste, or at the very, very best, complete inefficiency when it comes to taxpayer money.
Yeah, no, that was great. I'm glad that you read that. And I kind of went off on a tangent. I didn't circle back on the important year of 2021 and
Mhm.
why it's mentioned. It's because that's when they requested the audit from Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom rejected it. Why would you reject an audit on an issue that you're trying to solve?
You think you would
Hey, I
welcome it.
don't want to look, yeah, I don't want to look at any of the details. I don't want to see if the money that I've collected from all you Californians is going in the right place and if we're actually solving the issue. I don't want to see any of that. So we're not doing it. That's what he pretty much said. And he actually, this is funny, conveniently this year just passed Proposition 1. Okay.
Mhm.
Proposition 1 gives $6.4 billion more money, crazy, right? To a new homeless program to help out with like treatment centers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
After that, we got the audit, which
Mhm.
showed nothing essentially.
Mhm.
It was everything that everybody knew, which is nothing. They just confirmed it, like you said. They concluded we need to have more measures and stuff to see where this money is going because most of it just went to temporary encampments and housing. So it
Right.
really didn't go to anything. And like I said, we
Well,
could have just built tiny homes for everybody. I would have been
you
happy
know
with
what,
that.
Anthony? First of all, as far as just the hard cost, I
Hmm.
think you're absolutely right. I mean, in other words, you talk about, and the estimates are all over the place about how many homeless people are in California
Right.
right now. Upwards of 200,000, maybe a low of 150,000. Nobody really knows for sure. And by the way, I won't fault anybody for not knowing that number accurately. I won't even fault
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom for that because it's very hard to say for sure. They'll go city by city, but there are a lot of transients. When I say transients, I mean that literally. They're moving from one city to another, one state to another, things like this. And so it's hard to say. But the point is, let's say it's somewhere 150, 180,000 people, and you talk about $24 billion. Yeah, you could have bought each of them a tiny home. You're absolutely right about this. The the thing I would like for people to really appreciate is, where did this all start? And when we go back in time 10, 15, 20 years, did we have the same problem with homelessness in California? We've always had a problem with homelessness in California. One of the reasons is, of course, and I say this, it's because of the weather. In other words, it's a very comfortable place to live
Mm.
year round. Why don't they have, 100,000 homeless in North Dakota? Duh. So if you're going to have and by the way, it's also a very large geographically speaking state. So again, you can't fault any politician in California for that fact. However, I don't know what the numbers were 20 years ago, but no one is going to dispute the claim that it was a small fraction of what it is now. So what happened? So the same people behind all of this funding, throwing money at this problem, the same people are the same people and the same party and the same advocates that let people out of jail, that stop putting people in jail, and are letting people, or are sentencing violent criminals to shorter and shorter sentences. This is one, not the only, but this is one of the primary reasons we have seen an explosion of homelessness in California, certainly in about the last 8 or 10 years, when all of this decarceration movement started. This is one of the reasons. And so then what happens? Now we start having homeless programs. I don't even know what that means. I do not know what that means. The whole point is, you would think strategically and philosophically is to get these people off of the street. That's not happening. The more money they throw at it, the more people we have in the street. Why is that the reality? It's because they're not doing anything to discourage homelessness. This money is all incentivizing homelessness. That is the problem. When you tell a person living on the Golden State Freeway, Interstate 5, that if they are removed from that right shoulder in the bushes, that all of their belongings are not going to be stored and no cost to them. Do you think that discourages or encourages more of the behavior? I think the answer speaks for itself.
Yes. And I'd like to say too, if you live in California and you're listening to this, and we have an election cycle coming up, and we've been voting for years for people who make us feel good. We watch them on TV, they virtue signal, we go, yes, we're going to vote for this guy. He's saying all the right words. We need to vote for people who have a plan and who are competent. And I'm going to steal your joke, Mark. We need to not vote for these slick politicians. And we're not talking about Gavin Newsom's hair here, right? Gavin Newsom is slick. He could talk to anybody. And I mean, did you see him talking about Joe Biden? The most
Recently, or
competent. Yeah, he said he was the most
oh,
competent person he's met and all this
yeah,
stuff, right? He sells very good. He's a salesman and he's been doing it
yes.
for years. And now, I mean, I think fortunately a lot of people are kind of waking up to it because they're going, hey, this guy's been saying all this nonsense for years. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to help this, especially with the homeless problem that we brought up. He has done zero, zilch. All
Well,
he's gotten done was he took our money from our pockets and put it in the hands of people who are not solving any issues. That's all he's done, really.
Anthony, you are, of course, correct on that. It is a prime example. This is really a stark, crystal clear example of really wealth redistribution. And when people hear the word wealth, they think of uh, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I'm talking about people who are working paycheck to paycheck in California.
Hmm.
I'm talking people who make $120,000 a year in California and in their 30s or 40s who are renting, they cannot afford to buy a home.
Right.
That's where the vast majority of wealth, quote unquote, comes from. It's taking money out of their pockets literally. I think California now is up to close to around 13%, I think, a state income tax. And again, you have to make a whole bunch of money. I think I can't remember whatever, $1 million,
Yeah,
whatever.
but it's
But
also sales tax too. It's going,
I was
you're being
exactly
taxed
right.
on tax on your money.
Tax, you got state income tax, you have state sales tax, you have county sales tax, you have all these things. You have, I think today, you told me you're there, Anthony. It's over $5 a gallon for gas. I think in some places approaching
Yep.
$6 a gallon of
Yep.
gas
And I just
for
got
gas.
a lovely letter from the DMV for
Oh,
my registration for my vehicle, which is, I thought it was supposed to go down every year. And I mean, I at least expect that. My car's getting older
mhm.
and it's astronomical.
It's
And
astronomical.
I see people with really high registrations and I'm like, okay, I
Mhm.
got it good.
Yeah,
However, it's because of all this going on, it's like a domino effect. It's like they're just straight up just taking out of our pockets at this point. And
they
every
are.
single California feels it. And they need to be honest with themselves and go, the reason being is our government is so out of hand now with, I mean, it goes high up to Joe Biden. I mean, look at our gas prices, our grocery prices, everything. And this is just not helping at all. I mean, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish your thought.
I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sure I'm thinking you were going. In other words, we'll focus on California here for obvious reasons. Look, everybody knows where I lean politically, but I've always said
Hmm.
this, that one party rule for too long is not good for anybody, no matter what end of the political spectrum you're on or if you're in the middle. One party rule for too long is never good. It's like any other form of competition. You have to be challenged to stay sharp, to be efficient, to be, quite frankly, to be a good servant of the public that you're supposed to be serving. California has been one party supermajority supermajority for well over a decade. I think probably close to 20 years in the legislature in California. The left always talks about, oh, diversity. There is no diversity of ideas in California. None. It's the ultimate echo chamber. There is not one statewide elected Republican in California. Ladies and gentlemen, again, whoever you vote for, that is your absolute right. And I support you to vote for whoever you think is going to be the best servant for your community, your state, your country. But you also have to be honest with yourself and say, listen, if there's no one ever pushing back, if there's no gatekeeper in the form of opposition, this can't be healthy. And like you said, Anthony, this guy here, we know he wants to be president. And if you love what he's doing in California, when he does run, and he will, then you make sure you vote for him, because you're going to get exactly the same. You're going to get more of the same on a national level if he ever becomes president, as you are witnessing in California. So if you don't like stepping in poop in San Francisco, then you probably don't want to vote for him, because you'll be stepping in poop in every city in this country if he's ever elected president with enough congressional help. I want to, as far as I'm concerned, but Anthony, you finish this out where we want to. I want to, on an ancillary but related note here, I went to the California governor's website, and because we just recently saw all the protests here across the country, from the Palestinian supporters, the anti-Israeli protests, people burning the American flag, people calling America the Great Satan, people saying that Americans should be exterminated. Literally, these are things that you can watch on any number of platforms that were happening here recently. And the day after the closure for 5 hours of the Golden Gate Bridge, 5 hours, where my former comrades of the California Highway Patrol finally, I don't know what took them so long, but they arrested a couple of dozen of these people. By the way, which is scary in itself, you need a couple of dozen of these people shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for 5 hours. That's women with infants in their car. That's people trying to get to their doctor for maybe dialysis. That's people that are trying to get on planes that they miss them. They don't leave until the next day. That's people responding to, personal family emergencies. That's people trying to get to work. 5 hours, the Golden Gate Bridge is shut down. It's frightening. And it's happened all over the country. And there are other places in California, in Long Beach, I think in Oakland, and in the Bay Bridge. So you would think that on Newsom's own website, there would be some acknowledgement of the incident, what was done to mitigate it from the governor's office, something, maybe a denunciation of this kind of behavior, shutting down major arteries, costing the state tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue, something. What did they post on their website the day after, on the day of April 15th? There's nothing there on April 16th, the day after, but the day of, tomorrow in the Bay Area, Governor Newsom to announce climate partnership with Norway. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where the governor's priorities are. Grandstanding, virtual signaling. Does anybody think that partnering with Norway to a climate change partnership is going to enhance one single life in California? One. Meanwhile, what Anthony and I are talking about, this homeless situation just growing like mushrooms across the state of California, the complete lack of oversight with budgeting, with expenditures going up every year, not knowing where it is. This is where this man puts his focus. Climate partner with Norway. If he had any shame, he would be ashamed. He has none. He's not. Anthony, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, my final word on Gavin Newsom and this whole political situation that's going on right now. I just want to say to people that are listening or watching, it's not a war between the left and the right. It's really not. That's a distraction. It's really a war between the elites and us common folk, us common people. And why I say that is because we're the ones who get the shit end of the sticks here, right? Every single time. It doesn't matter what situation is going on. For example, and we might get censored over this, I don't know. During COVID, the lockdowns, who locked down the whole state? Gavin Newsom, right? Why did he get to keep his winery open and his businesses while everybody I knew, because I work with a lot of small businesses too, we everybody had to shut down. They lost a ton of money. They couldn't support their family. That was their livelihood. There's a lot of businesses, I'm sure in your city, your town, your area, you've seen the after effects of it. Why is he better than us? And another example, they just passed a minimum wage law, right? In California. It went up to I think $20 an hour, right? His friend from college is the owner of Panera Bread. They had an exclusion that they were a bakery, so they didn't have to up their minimum wage. And then he pretended afterwards, everybody called him out and said, "Hey, why is your friend here not having to pay their employees the state minimum wage?" And he acted outraged because he's a great actor. Remember, he's a great actor. He acted outraged and said, I didn't do that. I didn't know that was allowed in the bill. You're the one who signed it. Okay. So there we go. His own business, his friend, his own restaurant is starting at $16 an hour. Okay. What does that tell you? If anybody has a brain that worships Gavin Newsom, they got to see he thinks that he's better than you and me and everybody listening to this and everybody in California. Because why does he have to not abide by the rules and laws that are voted here? At least do that. He doesn't even do that. So it's really just a war between the elitists and us. And the left and the right, we know that the left caters more towards the elites and stuff. They're more towards that way. But that is just in all, it's just a distraction. So I want people to know that's really the focus of this, is that this guy thinks he's better than us and he wants to become president, and he's going to be talking really slick in the coming years. And we really just have to focus on what his actions were and what his inactions were, his competence level. Is he competent? I think he is. And I think that he didn't really want to solve these issues, because why we're going to keep voting for him to try to solve the problem. That's the whole game, in my opinion. But you can discern yours. So I'll leave it at that.
Amen to that. Anthony, you said it just right, as far as I'm concerned, my friend. Well, we're going to finish up on this story, and I think it's a great story. It's a great story because, unlike Gavin Newsom, we're going to talk about a woman who's actually taking care of business and shows courage. And she really kind of lived up to, I mean, not that she needed me. It just happens. This is something I believe in. I've said it on the show many times that here I was a first responder. Actually, I mean, maybe to the time I was a sergeant. By the time I became chief, I called myself a fourth responder. I never saw any real cop work at that point. But I encourage everybody to be their own first responder to the highest level possible in preparedness and training and self-awareness, situational awareness. Be your own first responder to the best of your ability and use your God-given talents. Think, live in the future, think about things that can happen and do your best to prepare for them for yourself and for your family. And the reason is because law enforcement simply, You could have 10 times the number of police officers in the country, and you still could not be every place all the time to prevent everything. There was some level of prevention with law enforcement. There's no doubt about that. We call it in-view patrol, just having that patrol car up and down your neighborhood street or up and down the highway. That deters crimes and traffic violations, no doubt about that. But the tiny, tiny percentage of where law enforcement can be or needs to be. So that's why I say be your own first responder. It's so, so important. So to that point, let me read some of this article. I'll skip around here a bit, try to find the juiciest parts. This is back from April 10th of this year. This is by Rebecca Cohen from US News. Idaho woman, 85, 85. By the way, don't get confused. That's also Adam Schiff's IQ, but this is this woman's age, 85, fatally shot home intruder in heroic act of self-defense. An 85-year-old Idaho woman shot and killed an intruder in her home in what a county prosecutor called, quote, one of the most heroic acts of self-preservation I have ever heard of. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, self-preservation. This is why the Second Amendment exists, to protect yourselves from evil doers. That's the reason. This is a very interesting article because it gets deep into the details about what happened. Bingham County Prosecutor Ryan Jolly said in the case review that the woman identified Wednesday as Christine Janine, I believe, acted in self-defense and ruled it was a case of justifiable homicide. I'll say so, and you'll know why here in a minute. Quote, that Christine survived this encounter is truly incredible, Jolly wrote. Her grit, determination, and will to live appeared to be what saved her that night. Again, 85 years old. According to the review posted on Facebook by Bingham County Sheriff's Office, an intruder identified as Derek Condon, and I was happy to say the late Derek Condon, broke into Janine's home around 2 a.m. on March 13th. Janine told prosecutors she was asleep in her Bingham County home when she was awakened by an intruder who was wearing a military jacket and black ski mask and was pointing, I thought OJ died anyway, and was pointing a gun at her and a flashlight at her, She said her disabled son was also home. Now think about this. She was 85 years old and she has a disabled son. So let's say he's 40, 45 years old, maybe. So an adult disabled person that she's taking care of. The review says Condon most likely hit Janine in her head while she was in bed because Janine said she'd been hit and because investigators found blood on her pillow and on her bedroom floor. Condon then handcuffed Janine and took her to the living room at gunpoint, according to the review. Then he handcuffed her to a wooden chair and asked her about her valuables when she said she didn't have much. He put his gun to her head, the review said. I want to stop there. Think about this. 85-year-old woman. I want you to try the best you can to imagine being woken up at 2 a.m. by an intruder, no matter what age you are, no matter what sex you are, male or female, and being dragged out of your bed after you were bludgeoned over your head, then dragged out of your bed, handcuffed to a piece of furniture in another room, knowing that your child, adult, but your child, it's another room disabled. And then you have a gun pointed at your head. Ladies and gentlemen, please try to imagine the terror that was going through this woman's mind. And she still kept her senses about her. According to the review, Janine told Condon she had 2 safes downstairs. Listen to this. He left her handcuffed in the living room as he looked through several rooms of her home in search of her valuables, prosecutor said. At some point, the review says, he discovered that Christine's son was also in the home and became angry at Christine for not telling him. Condon started to make numerous threats that he wanted to kill Janine, according to the review. While Condon was searching downstairs, he dragged the wooden chair to which she was handcuffed into her bedroom and grabbed her. Now, she did. She dragged the wooden chair. She's 85 years old. She dragged the chair back in the bedroom while he was gone rummaging through the house, grabbed her. I love this woman. Grabbed her 357 Magnum revolver. By the way, revolver, reliable weapon, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not comfortable with semi-automatics, you don't have to be. Revolvers are so reliable. Maybe less capacity as far as number of rounds, but you know it's going to work every time. She dragged the revolver from under her pillow. The review says, back in the living room, Janine hid the gun between the armrest and a cushion as she waited to see what Condon did next. Christine's memory of exactly what occurred next remains somewhat unclear, according to the review. We're almost done. Janine told prosecutors that at some point when Condon returned to the living room after having rummaged through her home, he again threatened to kill her. She ultimately made the decision that it was now or never and drew her concealed .357 Magnum and engaged Condon, striking him with both her shots. The review says, bam, in the
Wow.
silhouette. Condon returned fire. The story just keeps getting amazing. Last few paragraphs here. Condon returned fire, striking Janine multiple times in her abdomen, a leg, an arm, and her chest with a 9mm pistol. Multiple times, so at least twice in the stomach area, in her leg, her arm, and her chest. According to the review, Condon went to the kitchen where he died from the gunshot wounds. Janine, still handcuffed, fell over and remained on the floor for about 10 hours until her son came upstairs in the late morning and gave her a phone to call 911. This is how disabled I imagine this man has severe, I'm assuming from here, cognitive skills, because he had to give her the phone to make the 911 call. She'd been bleeding for 10 hours on the floor with at least 5 gunshot wounds, 1 to the chest, 2 in her belly. East Idaho News reported that Janine was taken to Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center in Idaho Falls. She has been released and is recovering. Subsequent investigation turned up a broken window in the back of the residence and a screwdriver near where Condon broke in, according to the review. On his body, Condon had a lockpick set, his car key, handcuff key, and a bag full of items stolen from the home. Condon's car was also found near their home, according to the review, and a set of footprints leading to the vehicle in the direction of the home was discovered. Based on Idaho's self-defense law, which means no person in the state shall be placed in legal jeopardy of any kind whatsoever for protecting himself. Jolly rule the killing justifiable, and so forth and so on. And a few more paragraphs. But Anthony, I'm going to give you a chance to chime in here. But one thing I want to say, this is one of the most extraordinary examples of self-defense I have ever heard because of all of the particular circumstances, the age, the fact that she was hit in the head, the fact that she knows she has a disabled son in the house. This is going through her mind, the threats of killing, the fact that she had to drag a chair while this guy was rummaging the house that she was handcuffed to back into the bedroom and then back out. This is like, what's the movie? Oh, Misery, where James Caan has to wait until the crazy person goes out. He's going around trying to figure out, they've got to go back and kind of put himself where he was left. All these things going on. But having said that, this is extraordinary. But what we're not told by the media is how often these types of incidents occur. And I'm talking about self-defense with a firearm. They're not reported on. By the way, a lot of them simply aren't reported. People defend themselves and not report it. It's happened to me when I was a cop off duty. I guess maybe policy-wise, I guess I should have, reported. This is 30 years ago. But I had someone lunging at me from about 30 feet away with a Bowie knife. We got in a pissing match. It was a road rage thing where someone cut me off on purpose. There was 2 young guys. They cut me off on purpose, flipped me off. I honked my horn. They slammed their brakes on in front of me on a little side street, and I was smart enough make distance, and I
Hmm.
see a guy jumping out of the car. So I exited with my weapon. I said, no. As he turns, he has this Bowie knife like this long. He's coming at me. And I drew down and I told him, today is the day you're going to die.
Wow.
And what did he do? He stopped, he got in his car, and he sped off. Now,
Wow.
I never, call the cops, the local PD to, report an assault. Again, that's my, privilege. I don't have to, file a crime against me if I don't want to. But things like that happen all the time with self-defense, legal self-defense. It doesn't go report it. This is one of the underpinnings of our Constitution, the right to defend yourself, the right to own and bear arms. And I want that to be known. This is why people must have the right to own firearms. I think any reasonable person, and I want to get your comments. I want you to send them in. You give me your opinion about this. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think any objective, fair-minded person would believe it'd be pretty likely that this woman was going to die that night had she not had that gun and not had the fortitude to do what she did. So, with that, Anthony, I'm going to give you the last word in this one as well.
Yeah, incredible story. Great telling it too. That woman, I believe that she mustered up that strength because her son was in the house. And she knew that if something were to happen to her, God knows what could happen to him. And the sad part is that, like you said, he had to give the phone to her to call 911. We don't know how disabled he is, but she knew that she was the only person in his life that could take care of him like the way that she feels he needs to be taken care of. And I truly believe that's a reason why she didn't die that night. And she found that strength to do that. And another thing I seen recently in Florida, I don't know what county it was, but it made me laugh. I believe it was a sheriff speaking about some home intruder incident, and he encouraged everybody. He said, "Hey, if someone's breaking your house, shoot them." He said it saved the taxpayer money.
I
We don't have to
saw
haul them to
that.
jail.
I saw that, and a lot of people, Anthony, and I said I give you the last word, but you brought up such a great point, and I want to respond to it because people say, "Oh, you're a bad person, or you're stoking, you know, violence or things like this that, about the sheriff saying if someone breaks into your house, shoot them." I wonder, and I'm sure there are people out there who have their home broken into, but if you've actually been the victim of a home invasion, if you've been home, if you have been violated to that level, and think about if you have children or if you have a dependent like this 85-year-old woman did in the home, and someone breaks into your house, and by definition, that's with the intent to commit a crime because they've done it once they illegally broken into your home. Do you think that you have a right to stop the action with deadly force? I think that you do. In other words, any criminal who enters a domicile, enters into someone's private home, the level of terror that can inflict on somebody, in my opinion, should give everybody the legal right to defend themselves with whatever level of force they deem necessary to defend themselves and their loved ones. I think the sheriff is 100% right, and different states have different laws, and so be it. But morally speaking, do you think that I'm going to let something happen to my family because I guessed wrong? No, this is not going to happen. And by the way, thank goodness I live in a state where I don't have to even second guess that, because there is an absolute right to defense law in this state, and I'm grateful for it. One of the many reasons I'm so glad to be here in the free state of Florida. So, with that said, Anthony, I appreciate it. It's been a fun show. And thanks for the shameless plugs for this show and for Truth Nation. It's absolutely great. I'm looking forward to having you again very soon. Keep sending me the great articles, great topics to discuss. And just a little tease, ladies and gentlemen, Anthony and I are working on, I think something's going to be really fun, very interesting. And it's going to be to somewhat degree, kind of on a personal level with me about my experience in law enforcement, some kind of high profile cases that everybody listening, I'm sure, is aware of. And we're going to talk about that. So coming soon to a podcast platform near you. So with that, thank you all. God bless you. God bless America. Take care of your families. Do what you have. Prepare for things that are not likely to happen, ladies and gentlemen, because they may be very low frequency, but they are absolutely super high impact if they might happen. So don't leave it a chance. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. God bless you all.
Thank you.